Welcome back to Melbourne Strength Coaches Podcast, number one in the hearts, number one on the charts. We are here with an ad for our coaching services. We've currently got an offer running with the boys. If you're feeling stuck with your training, you need more accountability or support, or you're just interested in the way in which we operate here as coaches, be sure to DM your favorite coach just in Instagram world, or you can jump through the first link in the description box, which will take you to the website. Welcome back to Melbourne Strength Coaches Podcast, number one in the hearts, number one in the charts. We're here with Angus Bradley for his third appearance. Well, you were a guest on episode number 4.
Oh, yeah.
And you said you were nervous for that. Why were you nervous for your first?
I've told this story so many times. It's just I still do put you on a pedestal, but obviously we have a bit more closer of a relationship. But just I just used to fucking
We'll change the subject.
Idolize you,
Yeah.
And then just over time, as we've built more and more of a relationship, but then even still, just to be on the Melbourne Strength Culture Podcast, like that was the first time I think we'd ever made content together or anything like that. Like you'd been a guest on my podcast, so it was still just like a huge step up for me. And even just this setup is hectic.
Yeah,
it's a little bit intimidating.
We're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying.
The second time, you haven't been on 3 times.
No, the second time we flew up to Queensland with Jordan Shallow.
Yeah. But that was as a host. That doesn't count as an appearance because what I'm most proud of today is I'm the fastest turnaround guest.
Nah, Luke Lehman. Sorry. Luke Lehman did back.
Done two.
He did two within about luck.
Yeah.
You don't have that either.
I'm coming for you, Lehman.
But you're the third guest, which I don't think anyone's done 3.
3P.
No.
Yeah, so I have done a 3P. All right, I am counting that Muscle Doc episode as a guest.
You have to,
because I put that in as hosting duties.
Yeah, no, that was guest host. That was something that we want to do more of. We want to get more hosts on. We're trying to get Jared Kay, Charlie, myself, Jared Kay, and then some of his footballers on.
He'd be perfect.
So hopefully Jared can open him up a little bit and really get some high quality behind the scenes AFL action.
But I think we have similar ideas about creating like a sense of community within our shows because I've got you on it's meant to be a monthly sort of slot. Like that's the intention.
The variety hour.
The GPP boys in the UK, like Keane and Chris, the intention is to sort of like build that like
universe.
I don't want to chat to, because at the end of the day, High Performance Podcast is a relatively guest-driven show, but then like there's only so many people I actually want to chat to in the fitness industry. And if you're just always searching for new guests, you're just going to end up being forced to chat to people where you just don't actually want to have a conversation with them. And I think when you look at Revive Stronger, he's probably got like 8 to 10 guests. And he does get random people on here and there. But again, like Mike Israetel is on like once every 6 weeks. And it does just allow you to, again, like form a bit of a relationship and actually go deeper and not just like, oh, tell us a bit about yourself and then 30 minutes of rapid fire and then see you later.
Yeah, well, I feel like with any guest spot, you've got to go through it's almost the journey of like what they are in the industry, where they've come to, their likes and like their training methods and all of that sort of stuff. And that's the first episode. But then... And you've said this a number of times, and we chatted about it last night when we had dinner. I went to Itchy Knee. Shouts out Itchy Knee.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Omega-3 is fucking firing in my brain right now.
The idea that at some point, people don't give a fuck about training anymore. They just want to, you said they want to see your morning routine. Like, what do you do in the day? Like they just want to get to know you. And I think we've felt this with the potty. Like, the more we've opened up about ourselves and who we are, like, the more the community loves it. And that's why I think we ultimately like the Boilers episodes.
We're getting straight into the cute shit because that's the thing. Yeah, like you said, people just don't trust that people want to know about that or stuff. It's like, oh, I'm a powerlifting coach. All people want me to talk about is powerlifting. But once people give a fuck about you as well, because like, this is the way I frame it to people in my mentorship as well. Like sometimes I get a big buzz on about like how much interaction I get on the gram and stuff, like big dopamine hits. I'm like, oh, over 1,000 likes. So many people love this content. But then I reflected on the way I consume content and I think about like what I'm like when I'm interacting with someone's post. And half the time I'm just sitting there in bed, doom scrolling. I'm like, mouth breathing. Like I don't even like my pupils don't dilate. There's no physical reaction. I don't even read half the posts, just double tap. But then my podcast, like anyone who's jumping over and consuming my content like that, it's like, it's the complete opposite. Like those people genuinely give a fuck about me. Hopefully I'm not speaking out to it, but like, again, there is a much more intimate relationship there. And it's just like, all of a sudden you can sort of go into those things. Like I said, once people actually give a shit about you, then it's just like, everything's just potentially opened up as content.
Yeah. You can break down some of those rigid walls relating to what you talk about and all that sort of stuff.
Because that's it. People worry about, they're like, I'm going to run out of shit to say. But I'm like, once you realize the broad spectrum of all the stuff that you can go into, then it's just limitless. And
One thing I've seen on your content lately, and it must be part of your mentorship, but the idea of like, if people that are reluctant or hesitant to put ideas out there, and you're like, well, if Joel Seedsman can fucking make a post, like if he's confident enough to make a post, why can't you put some of your ideas out there? Like it's already a dumpster fire of ideas out here. Like
there's two sides to the Dunning-Kruger effect, and everyone just always talks about how overconfident the idiots are, and it's like everyone sees that, and we've given that enough lip service. It's like we need to talk about the other aspect of the Dunning-Kruger effect and hold each other accountable. It's like, no, you have good ideas, like you have an obligation to share them, because there's just this space, right? Like Instagram, all these social media platforms, they want content. And if you're not providing it with content, then you're leaving the door open for the Seedmans and for all those charlatans. So instead of just sitting on the sidelines complaining about it, it's like you got to show up and you have to fill the space. I just fucking...
Well, there's something that you said yesterday as well. It's like the complaint is the content. Like you had people that would go in your comment section and have a crack at you. And it's like, well, you know what? You would actually be better off constructing that and formulating an actual post and then building content from that. Everyone's got fucking opinions. You know what I mean? It's just the likelihood or the want to express that for fear of whatever, judgment or whatever. But it's like, at the end of the day, it's all fucking opinions. You know what I mean?
I was really lucky though, because like that sort of had just been part of my inbuilt experience in the fitness industry. I used to be that guy in the comment sections. That's how I got kicked out of the first gym I worked at. Like, the guy who ran the gym that I was paying rent at was launching this weight loss challenge. He was like, all right, so got this new whiz-bang diet. If you want to lose fat before summer, can't eat bananas or beans for the first 2 weeks. And I was in my keyboard warrior comment section phase, and I was like, pretty sure you can eat bananas and still lose weight. And then he just took it straight to the DMs. He was like, meet me out at the front of the gym. Essentially, like, let's throw down. And I was like, fuck. And that was the only place in town as well where you could just pay rent and run your own operation. So once that wasn't an option anymore, that sort of forced me to move up to the city. But that was also when I sort of realized as well, it's like, you're not going to change anyone's ideas by going into their comment section, because you're just random internet man. You know what I mean? So I've found that it's much more productive, and I've got that proof of concept now to just speak past people, build your own audience, and then they notice that. And then all of a sudden they're marching to the beat of your drum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media is fucking awesome, and I don't understand the idea that people just fucking bash it and be like, it's a tool. And I like the medium is the message, like all those things that you speak about. I think you've got the best grasp on it in Australia currently of how to like have an impact, say the right things creatively, and all of that sort of stuff, and ultimately grow. And you have been fucking growing. Like it's
because I didn't waste my time doing a fucking sports science degree just to go supervise some fucking bicep curls. Studied journalism. I learned how to make propaganda. And that's just the game we're playing these days. Like,
there was a key moment in Jamie's career actually where he wanted to, or didn't want to. I think he sort of got positioned to try to do EP, and then he missed it, and then as a result of him missing it, or they didn't let him in. You weren't smart enough, sorry.
No, that was it. I had everything.
What did they actually say? Why didn't you get in?
You're too much of a risk.
What?
Yeah.
Why a risk?
So
is this peak kickboxer phase?
No. So I was post. It was my redemption arc. So in my bachelor, I was an absentee student. I was a piece of shit through that phase, and I didn't go to uni for like 2 years pretty much. I would be there, but I would scrape through. I ended up failing like 5 subjects, so my hex is dense. But I got through, and I ended up interning here, there, everywhere, and stuck in the AFL, fucking Allied Health, and doing all this sort of shit. And I actually got quite close with someone that was on like the board as well, working
This
through
is full blown nepotism.
I was like, man, I've got experience.
I've got the lot.
And I've turned it around. And like, funnily enough, I'm already coaching like fucking half of your cohort. Well, it wasn't half, but I was like, so what's that say about me? Anyway, I went in interview with the head, and she's like, this is all fantastic. We probably wouldn't be able to get you in full time. We'll get you in part time. We'll speak. I had these sick letters of reference, whatever else. And they're like, the end of it was like, you're just too much of a risk.
And he didn't get in.
Yeah, and I didn't get in.
Well, they were right.
They were right. Yeah.
So you did better than me. You were just, at least you were showing up and failing. Like, I dropped out of uni and lied to my parents for 18 months telling them that I was still going. So like,
is this in your band phase?
Yeah, I had to be out of the house on certain days of the week, just like finding things to do to keep up this act that I was actually going to uni.
I've heard. I feel like I've heard that story. Heaps.
Yeah.
Not that story.
I
Like
know
that
who-
same
I know who
similar
it was.
story.
I've got a Greek
Because
mum.
I was
though.
the first person
it's-
in my entire extended family to go to uni. So like mum and dad, I swear they didn't even know what degree I was doing. They were just like, my kid got into uni, and because the older generation's understanding in university, and it was true in their generation, is it's just this 6-figure job factory. Whereas like I don't think they realised how many arts degrees were going down. It's fucking it's a
How many
bloodbath
roads
out
to
there.
nowhere? Undergrads, any undergrad is just.
But
fucking,
then I've sort of come around full circle because it's like I get so much use out of all the stuff that I learn at uni now.
for
Just
journalism.
through how I've applied it. Well, that's my whole shtick, right? Like fitness industry is primitive. You can't learn enough about everything and all this. Everyone gives so much lip service to a principle-driven approach, yet everyone always wants this like highly fitness-specific education. I'm like, no, if you want to learn principles, turn away from the fitness industry, look at everything else. Because we've been doing this shit for like 50 years, whereas there's so many other industries that have been handling complex dynamic systems that have run into the same issues that we're facing now in this evidence-based era. And yeah, it's just the strategies are there if you're willing to look outside the fitness industry.
Speaking-
Shout out Nassim Taleb.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but I want you boys, because we love Greek. We just love Greek shit here. Let's be honest. Can you explain to these boys Pythagoras and the influence? The influence of Pythagoras.
I don't know. I've seen you dropping Pythagoras here and there. I haven't read into it at all.
Before you go on this rant, I was listening to the podcast where you spoke about it, and as you were talking about it, I was like, oh, this is exactly like music theory. And then you started talking about music theory, and I was like,
It's not just the hypotenuse guy.
motherfucker. But then you started, and I was like, that was a pivotal moment in my life.
Oh, hey, Charles.
In my thought process, I was like, yeah, it's all changed. Now I fully get the evidence-based.
Conundrum.
Yeah, I get it.
So hit us,
So
Angus.
tell Bouz, because he hasn't heard it.
Because I know you want to open yourself up more about this line of thinking. And you told me yesterday at dinner, I'm not ready to hit Instagram with it because it's too soundbite. I need more depth. This is the time.
Long format.
Hit Bouz with some
this
Pythagoras.
conversation also was probably a bit of a catalyst for me wanting to do a triathlon. Fuck you. Because I started going, no,
Bro,
because
you're a
I
life
started,
changer. It is what it
because
is.
I go, there's no fucking rules. Because we're boxed into this, a powerlifter's got to be this, a X person's got to be that. And I'm like, no, there's no fucking rules.
Go.
Go, give me
Go.
the story.
Pythagoras. So,
Nah,
C
it'll be better. We've built
equals
the-
A squared B
Is
squared.
this the sin cos tan
E equals
thing?
MC squared.
Sin cos tan?
So we're in the peak of the evidence-based era of fitness. Everyone's obsessed with quantitative data and just saying things like, well, you know, based off the data, objectively speaking. But and this is something that underpins my worldview, is that there's no separation between art and science. They're just intertwined, and just any of these fields that you look at, they sort of started out with this really rigid scientific sort of approach, and then as you actually establish really useful and genuinely flexible heuristics, then they just merge into the art forms that they truly actually are. And like, you know, because at the end of the day, there is no real objectivity outside of the individual perspective. And I think like when you sort of see where science is leading us in fitness, you're sort of seeing that all this objective data is leaning us back into subjectivity, right? Like dynamic systems theory, biopsychosocial thinking and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter what field you look at, whether it's music, whether it's cooking, they all embody all these qualities of both an art and a science. So music's the best example because, you know, we've been playing music for thousands of years now and people just view it as a pure art form. But that's only because it is just actually mature. At the end of the day, all music is underpinned by mathematics and science. And so it was Pythagoras that worked out, like, because pitch is infinite, right? Like there's an infinite amount of not notes, but like that's what Pythagoras established. It's like the Western scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And he just mathematically worked out that like, oh, all of these notes are a perfect fifth apart. And you don't even have to understand the maths. As long as you stay within the confines of this scale, you can play a bunch of random shit and just feel like you're improvising and just making shit up. But because he established such useful and flexible scientifically underpinned heuristics, you can not even understand the underpinning mathematics or science of it and play with it like it is a true art form. And again, music is one of those things where it's like, it's very obvious the scientific and mathematical components of it. And there's, in some sense, there is this objective, like what is and isn't good music, but then everyone also accepts the inherent subjectivity of it. Another field that I love to look at, everyone knows I have a musical background, but I've also always loved cooking. And again, food science is a thing, just objectively certain flavors go together, but you would never hand someone a dish and be like, well, objectively speaking, this is the best chicken soup anyone could ever fucking make. But again, in the evidence-based era, people were like, well, I read all this fucking sports science, so objectively speaking, here's this awesome program. Whereas like what you should be doing is you should be preparing it like a chicken soup. You're like, all right, objectively, there are these scientific heuristics that do underpin good training in a certain sense, but there's still this moment where you have to present it to the person who's consuming it and be like, based on your subjective individual perspective, like, how do you feel about this thing? Like, do you think that this is a good program? Do you think this is a good piece of music? Do you think that this is good chicken soup? So there's just no way around this subjectivity thing. But again, everyone's just got their heads stuck in the quantitative data sandpit right now. And I'm just trying to pull our heads out of it and be like, can we just sort of look outside our industry and see where this stuff is going? Again, Nassim Taleb, like why I love him, like human body, everyone accepts it now. It's a complex dynamic system made up of systems that's impossible to predict. And that's the same as an economy. It's a system made up of systems. And I love comparing it to economics because they have way better data sets than we do. And even Nassim Taleb is so frustrated at all these people who just use all this historical data and then think that they can predict this complex dynamic system. And he's like, nah, it's bullshit. You can't predict these systems. There's no such thing as the rational economic man. And all of those concepts apply to fitness. And we have even smaller data sets. And again, everyone is just so overconfident in these limited little data sets and the way they think that they can predict things based off historical data.
Yeah. So with that, because we now would have the ability to embrace chaos, so to speak, or adjust on the fly and program, and it is more, I feel, as the person writing the program or doing it or coaching someone, it does feel like it is more of that art form. As an education, as a beginner coming into it, do you think that there is some...
yeah, because like music, right? You learn hard rules in music when you're first learning it, but then over time you're like, oh, there's more flexibility in these rules than I thought. And I also love how you brought up this concept of embracing chaos, because so many people talk about like physics and stuff these days, and like, objectively speaking, based off physics, this is the way to do this exercise. But again, if you actually look at physics, it's been on the same sort of trajectory before the 1920s when we had that old model of physics. Classical physics, where you have that model of the atom where it's like, all right, here's the nucleus and here's precisely where all the electrons are, and we can predict where they are, and we can also predict where they're going to be at a certain point in time. But then was it Niels Bohr when he sort of came up with that quantum model of the atom, which we all, I think, accept now is much more accurate depiction of reality. It's sort of they've intellectualized and embraced this uncertainty and there's this chaos. It's like, all right, so the nucleus is somewhere in this cloud, but it could also be in several other locations simultaneously, and maybe there's an electron here, but it could also be here, and I don't know where it's going. I have a vague idea maybe. So it's just funny, all these people who think they're into physics, and it's just like, are you though?
Yeah. We interrupt this program from word from our sponsors, which is a new sponsor, Three Kings Wealth Management, which is a financial company and financial advice that help people like these two lads improve their financial position long term and set themselves up for their future. They actually use the services though, so it's a proper ad. How's it all going?
That's lads.
These two lads. That's some sort of profile. What do you think I don't know about
money?
Watching
Spanian.
Adslay.
You think I don't know about money? Well, you're right. That's why I hired a financial advisor, and it was the best thing I've done. That's for sure. Ryan, I think with it all, like the biggest thing that I was worried about, money, saving, whatever, is I couldn't live a life. You know what I mean? But I know if I said to Ryan tomorrow, my dream is to buy an AMG and 2 jet skis, he would lay out a plan for me to do that. Obviously, in a responsible manner, not just dropping that and dropping my other goals to maybe buy a house or develop a retirement fund or whatever, you know. So I love that, and it's been a big help, and I know I'll get that AMG one day.
So for me, I'm a bit of a stress head around money. I like to have a plan, and working with Ryan, I've been able to implement a plan to actually achieve what I want to do, which is get a Gucci tracksuit. But in all seriousness, I like to have a plan. I like to be on, just like with training, you got a plan, you got some goals. This is what we're doing to achieve it. And when you deviate a little bit from the goals, you get back on plan and you're set to get there. So,
well, he did put one more thing in for this ad read, which is that his books are actually full. So bad luck, suckers. Yeah. But he did say that if you listen to the podcast, they will open their books. So let him know
that you know a guy.
Yeah, let him know that you know a couple of us, us lads.
Dirty Cypriots from the Strength Culture podcast,
and they'll open the books for you. So Three Kings Wealth Management. The links will be in the bio. Thank you very much.
So, what would your remedy be? The PT, the little fucking guy just rolling through. The evidence is out. The frameworks has got this. It's 3x10 the lot. I've got this formula to create this structure. Because you find it always happens. Someone gets way too lost in the weeds in that regard, and then either they're stuck in the weeds forever, or they stumble on someone like you and get brought out of the weeds and realize nothing matters. You know what I mean? Or
you need to not be a full nihilist and be like, we'll just do whatever then. Right?
Yes,
like
exactly.
You need to have some attachment to the heuristics, but then just like shade in the borders a little bit, not have rigid sort of borders. When it comes to handling complex dynamic systems, I think no one summed it up better than Nassim Taleb with the anti-fragile approach, because again, people use data to try to make optimal economic and financial decisions. And he's like, nah, fuck that. There is no optimal. It doesn't exist when you're handling complex dynamic systems. What you have to do is like, there's an infinite potential of like ways you could go about solving this problem, but there's a much shorter list of threats to the system. And that really resonated with me and my personal experience developing training programs. There's an infinite amount of good programs you can write, but there's a smaller list of dumb things that can fuck your program. And they're the things that people need to be paying attention to. It's like, not like, how do I write a program to make someone stronger? It's like, what are the things in a program or that could be missing in a program that will fuck up someone's progress? And you just manage threats to the system.
Yeah, so we're talking things like a dumb thing that I would see in a program would be like really sharp increases in volume.
Yeah.
It's like the science will try to tell you that it's this acute to chronic workload ratio and all of this sort of stuff. But in reality, it's like just this awareness that doing too much of anything is probably going to eventually be shit.
And that's a great example, because like Franco and Pellizzeri just took the biggest shit.
He just ripped it apart
last year on acute chronic work rate. Because again, people just want these rigid rules because they don't want to think critically. They just want a hard rule that they can just apply again and again and again. And like, that's the thing. I'm not trying to say that like load management isn't a thing, but the same way that everyone went on this journey of like thinking that biomechanics was predictive of injury, but then all those neurotic people jumped over to load management. They're like, oh, I spiked my load by 1%. That's why my knee
It was
blew
my
up.
sleep. I didn't sleep well last
You're just
night.
applying the same neurotic mindset that you had with biomechanics to load management. It's just, again, a fragilista mentality, as Taleb would call it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, fragilista is going to fragilista. It doesn't matter if you're into PRI, N1, or starting strength. There's just neurotic. Like, wherever you go, there you are, right? And like, and we all saw it. Like, we talk about
no, you see these they just shift from one method to the next.
And it's like, they're the problem, not the system.
Yeah, the system.
The systems with their rigidity. And because that's the thing, like, everyone's on this George Box shit. So all systems are wrong. But I think we need to pay attention to the second half of that quote a little bit more nowadays, at least in the woke side of the fitness industry. It's just like, there's useful heuristics in all of these systems. So rather than just rejecting all the systems, I would rather just try to embrace all of them and just try to find the useful and overlapping parts. And I think that's the journalist in me, right? Like, I just cross-reference all my sources. I'm like, what's he saying? What's he saying? What's he saying? What's he saying? Get out of your fucking silo, see what everyone's saying, and then you find the commonalities. And that's ultimately where the principles lie. Again, if you want to get it from fitness.
Yeah, well, I think, and this is actually a big chunk of something I do in my current mentorship, is this idea of like trying to actually find the similarities across all of these things. That's probably telling you more than what the individual or the verbiage or the nomenclature or whatever the hell, like however they define terms and all of that doesn't matter as much as what are they actually saying and how are they actually
Yeah,
getting
but
their
just-
points across.
Just don't compare line of pull to power either.
No, we can't.
That's the one similarity. You should-
no. That's a no-go,
That's a-
apparently.
don't
Yeah.
do
He's got a 30-second tee off.
Yeah, you've got a
That
time. We're
30
going to set
seconds.
you up on a timer.
Shotgun.
No, all I'm saying is the offer's
actually
there.
want to
if
box
he
him?
wants to do a one, people say we had a debate. You can't just email me out of nowhere. We hopped on a random Zoom call. It's like, that's not a fucking debate. If he wants to do a proper debate with a mediator, I'm down. Also, if he wants to do a charity fight night, donate all the proceeds to your shitty EMG research. The offer's there. Guy's been threatening to get in shape for the last 2 years. I'm like, come on, mate. You've had enough time to prep. I'll be in the States in February. If you want, like I said, I'm down for the cause.
I've got it.
No. It
what-
has to be mixed martial arts because
Yeah.
I feel like without because I just know guy's got no gas tank. He's soft upstairs as well, and I need
a
a
grapple.
cage where I can be mobile because in a boxing ring it's just too hard to get cornered. He'd be able to preserve his energy.
The
and I might get
GPP, the
flatlined.
GPP stuff, I reckon would.
You'll be ready for it.
You'll be ready.
Yeah, and like
ready
I
for
said,
it.
I'm not trying to be some big tough guy. Like I'm not into violence or anything
let's
like that. For the sake of charity and stuff like that, like could be fun.
All for a charity fight. I reckon we shave Jamie's head. He can be the Dana White of all this.
Well, no,
We're
because
gonna do it.
since I
That's the
brought this
promo
up,
company.
a few people have reached out. I'm like, man, you could have a full card here because
Fight it,
Woodford versus Prime Train.
Yeah,
and
that's
then,
teeing off at the moment.
So what? Who would be on the undercut?
Well, Woodford and Prime is a one-way street. Let's be honest. That is all Woodford just yelling at Prime. Prime doesn't, by the sounds of it,
it's
doesn't give a
just-
fuck. Yeah. Has he even responded? Probably
I don't
not.
know.
He probably shouldn't respond. But
Nah.
who else can we get? Who else can we get brawling out there? Surely there's been some blow-ups.
There's a
There's some
few
beefs.
beefs, but then I don't want to publicly air them. But even just over the last 48 hours since I sort of threw the concept out there, shout out to Thomas Lilly. Sorry, it wasn't his idea, but someone wrote into the Zero Weakness podcast being like, who do you think could win in a scrap between Kassem and Angus? And I got the nod.
you got
of
the nod.
course, like it's the logical choice. And then I was like, fuck, like, could just do it for charity.
The GPP, I reckon, would hold you in very
Because
well
he says
stead.
it's not just bodybuilding.
Yeah, no,
Let's find out.
it's grappling.
Also, I'd take him in a bodybuilding show anyway because it's all about conditioning. And I'm fucking stage lean you. I shouldn't say that. I got called out for saying I was shredded year round. They're like, mate, you're not shredded. Like, there's a difference between having abs and being shredded. I'm like, since when is shredded an objective term?
Another hot take that I absolutely love of yours is the concurrent training stuff, because obviously we're on a bit of a concurrent kick at the moment and loving it, I must admit. But
And aren't people filthy about
yeah,
it?
people are, but
yeah, fuck you, Charlie.
fuck you,
Fucking
baby.
asshole going for your runs? What are you trying to prove? You think you're better than me?
I am better than you.
The stick of everyone thinks concurrent training is going to kill your gains, and then you just post like a CrossFit athlete, just like fucking more jacked than anyone, more shredded than anyone, more fucking like aerobically fit than anyone.
Well, I had Alex Viada on the podcast, and I'm like, oh man, you're like the OG concurrent training athlete. Like, how'd you work out that the interference effect didn't exist? And he's like, man, I was just coaching rugby players my whole life. Like, these big jack cunts, and then they're running around for like 90 minutes. He's just like, oh, of course. And I think, I can't remember what podcast it was on, but Evan Peacon, he's a real energy systems guy, and he was like, again, back to sort of what we were talking about before, everyone in the textbooks, it's a really simple way to explain things to people. It's like, well, you've got your aerobic system and then you flip over and you alternate over to this energy system. But then he was like, nah, the reality is a bit more complex. It's like all these systems are always running concurrently over the top of one another. And then once you understand that, you're like, oh yeah.
We can do it all at
It's,
once anyway.
The interference effect is all there is. Like, all the systems are always running over the top of one another. It's impossible to isolate any of these systems. Same way you can't truly isolate your iliac lat.
Yeah.
And it's fucked. What's
It's an
the
integrated
paper?
fucking system. Like, we make the same mistakes over and over and over again.
Yeah. Charlie's on a kick with Alex Viada at the moment. Loving him.
Yeah, I love it. And Fergus
Papa.
Crawley.
Yeah, because that's it. Because I talk about
Fergus.
cardio not killing your gains, but fucking look at me. I'm not the best advertisement for it.
Yeah, what would you do with Charles? Charles wants to get into running. He's going to do triathlons next year. How are we going to build this man up?
I think the biggest thing is like people instinctively manage and progress their weight training so much more intelligently just because it's like very obvious what you're doing. Like, it's very obviously stupid to just walk in on your first day in the gym, throw 420s each side. Like, no one's going to be able to do that. Whereas like running, it is so easy for you just take another step, take another step, take another step. And like that runner's high is so euphoric. So it really is just about like trying to just manage your emotions with it, because it just feels so good, especially when you haven't done it for ages. And again, build up your work capacity, look into off-feet options and things like that.
How's your training
That's
back?
what we're doing.
Yeah.
My training.
Yeah, with it.
Oh,
How are you going? 'Cause
Well,
you weren't originally planning on introducing the running until after Nats, but then
yeah, but then I realised I don't give
you couldn't
a
wait.
fuck. I realised I don't give a fuck. So I'm going to run now anyway. But I've only been running once a week, Friday. And so talking about dumb decisions that threaten the system. Last Monday, I squat
You introduced a Black Swan event.
I introduced the Black Swan event into my life. I squat on Tuesday, heavy. I decided to run Monday. It wasn't the smartest idea. So the week after, I adjusted, auto-regulated. That's a thing that exists out there. And I did on Friday. Had a couple of days extra off to recover, and I was fine. But yeah, I'm off legs conditioning on Monday, air bike, and then run on Friday. If you're feeling a little bit stuck with your training like me, you don't really have much direction, DM me for coaching.
So that's the first sort of thing you've
That's
found.
it.
That's the first threat to the system is running the day before a heavy squat session.
Wasn't the
And that's what I
smartest.
mean. It's just a bit of a common sense thing.
Wasn't
But
the
then it's like,
smartest.
I just enjoy doing dumb shit in the gym. Like I didn't get into training just to be like, oh, I want to be really intelligent about
Optimal.
this sort of thing. Like signed up to anchor my brother's 4x100 and 4x400 relay team at a track meet 2 weeks notice. It's like I just love doing shit like that. I've spiked the fuck out of my running load out of nowhere. Haven't properly sprinted since high school, but I'm just like, man, like makes me feel alive doing shit like this. Like this is what it's about to me.
The lot, Jamie.
The lot. I was just thinking, I'm like, I don't even think that's as big a threat. I think the threat for you for the heavy squat was that
It was the feet.
Well, it's a novel stimulus.
the-
So if you had been jogging anyway and you had that 1 day spacing in
be
between, you'd be fine. But especially if it's of a low enough intensity.
That's
it's
what
not
it was.
fucking hours,
So
you know.
currently I get to about 2Ks and my arches are like roaring, like they're red hot. My soleus a little bit. And so that was more what I was like the next day when I was walking out my squats, I felt a bit like heavy and wobbly and stuff. And I was like, I probably need to space this out a bit better.
It's just a novelty thing.
But it'll
as
be
well,
fine once I build up like to a 10K.
Well, and that's the thing with a lot of traditional strength training and all the powerlifting. It's like you're so strong from the knee up. And then again, everyone's like, oh, calves don't respond to training. But then it's like, it sort of comes back to bite you in situations like that.
Yes, you got to actually train them.
Build the tissue tolerance.
daily.
Tolerance, daily.
Oh, I
been
swear to
slack
God,
with my
man.
daily carbs.
Yeah, I've sucked that. I did as well. That
In the
was
shower.
it.
Habit
But
stacking.
That was
in
the first
shower.
time I'm like, I don't know if it
carbs
was.
in the shower.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. I do it. I
One
do it
set
brush
to
my
failure.
teeth. I brush my teeth and do it because I do
James,
single leg
clear where
balance
you
stuff in
at.
my rehab.
This is
Yeah.
it.
No, so I do 1 set to failure standing, and then I do a fat isometric in a shortened position to failure, and then isometric just off the heel to failure. 1 set done
In the shower.
in the shower.
I think as well,
Naked.
like people
Nuts hanging.
overvalue like just slow calf work.
Yeah.
Matt Watson, he doesn't train his calves. It's just all plyo approach.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing as well. Like it doesn't just, I vibe with calf raises and I think everyone wants a big juicy set of calves. I think there's value in them as well. But yeah, I think people really just
Plyo.
overlook the plyometric side of things because at the end of the day, running relatively plyometric activity, prepare yourself for the demands of the thing
The
that you're trying to
pogos.
do.
I've been doing the pogos as well.
Extensive pliers, baby.
I've been doing the pogos.
And that's the whole thing. Like people are just so scared of making their clients do plyos. But again, like people just don't know how to progress these things intelligently. Everyone wants to be doing mad depth jumps
depth
and things
jumps
like
off.
that. But it's just like keep your dick in your pants, do your extensive plyos, and then build into the mad shit. And then all of a sudden you'd be looking like a bloody springbok, like Matt Watson on Instagram, just watching his single leg jumps and all his hopping. It just gets me so
After
G'd up.
you've showed me some of these other circles that I haven't been exposed to on Instagram, there are some weapons out there and some very
Shout out
unique-
Will Rattel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's a freak,
Hoss.
man.
So
Weighted hurdle jumps
he's a
and
big,
shit.
he's a big one that I was just like, I watched his training session was 4 things. It was an ollie lift, like a 120 kilo snatch, into lunges to failure, into hamstring curls, he jumped after all that. And I was like, this guy's got it.
He just simplifies training so much. He's like, pick up something heavy, run, do some jumping.
That was
You
do
look
something
at
to
it.
I
failure.
love the reels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jake Tour is another one as well. It's like dunk, Zercher, max
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and then fucking pumps arms after.
But
I'm
again,
like,
just
this
the vibes are immaculate. Like, it's just so
100%.
much fun.
It is, and it's like the intensity, like the principles are there, but it's also like the intensity is driving it for them. These guys are doing the lot, and that's what I've found, and just in my own training is the variation. The variations what saves, what is allowing me to max out all the fucking time, which I think's a lot of fun, like a lot of fun. But it's like you're stimulating yourself across everything that frequently to still make gains. You know what I mean?
Well, and
I
you're
don't know if-
cognitively engaged.
Oh,
like I think when
that's-
you plan too far out in the future, when you over periodize and stuff like that, it's like
models that.
you're not living in real time. Whereas like you're just present when you have that more reactive approach and you're living on the fly. It's like there's still a decision making process, but again, like you're so much more present in that daily session.
Yeah, well, even just coming back to something you said earlier in this exact chat is that idea of like and you've been saying this for ages with your own, and it's sort of like your direction with marketing, but like you don't have to be boxed into one thing. Like you don't, if you're a powerlifter, you don't have to just do this style of training, like 4 days a week, fucking top single, blah, blah, blah. It's like there's so many other things that you could do, and you don't have to train 100% of the time.
GPP is
Not
key.
everyone wants to be a fully jacked, like get as maximally jacked as possible. Like some people just want to enjoy their training and do some random shit and fun stuff. Like,
It used to
best fun.
get to me so much. Like I'd just be in the weightlifting gym, just this skinny guy, highly specific weightlifting training, and some guy who just quit footy 6 weeks ago come in, power clean my max on the first day. I was like, fuck's sake. Like, and everyone's like, oh, weightlifting specificity. And I'm like, it's just, that's not my experience.
Yeah, I find for like we're talking. I feel for like a is this the word? Sustainment.
sustainability.
I don't know. I was going to say
You got to complete the sentence so we know
sustainment
what.
of enjoyment.
Sustainable.
In that context, I don't know. I
Sustainability
feel like
of
we're talking about
enjoyment.
like user experience here as well, like fucking oath. But as a coach, for someone that is trying to extend their love of this shit as well, I just find the hyper specific. I'm a bodybuilding coach. Like for me, this is for me. I'm into bodybuilding. You got to fucking love it. You have to love bodybuilding. But for me, it's not enough. The beauty of coaching now and like looking at a bit of bodybuilding guys and then the athletic guys and then the powerlifters as well. It's like, man, you're using the top single and some back offs or whatever the fuck with some contrast pairings, which is fun as, and then they're doing their hypertrophy work with triple drop sets that you're just pulling from everywhere. You want me to change your life? DM me for coaching. So for
You
stimulation
learn things
as a
about
coach,
the specific stuff as well. Like there's stuff you learn from looking outside of your field and you're like,
Yes.
oh, that's something that people in my silo
Yes.
are missing. Because again, I think like for weightlifters, always got dicky knees and stuff like that, and all your tendons just like getting so angry. It's like that's viscoelastic tissue. It behaves very differently under different velocities. So again, like providing yourself with just a broad spectrum of stimuli to like just keep your tendons healthy. It's like, yeah, get your weightlifters and your powerlifters doing some light plyos and stuff. It's like, is it highly specific? No, but it can help you manage some of those threats to the system, because again, big threat to the system for a lot of weightlifters, a lot of powerlifters is keeping those tendies healthy. But again, if you're living life at 4010, your tendies are only getting one stimulus and they
Yeah.
get a bit grumpy sometimes.
I really like
Ready for the lot.
the lens of the manage the threats. I think that's a really,
it's fucking, I can't escape it. Like it's the best way of looking at it.
but that's exactly what. We literally do that in everything. That's literally how we progress with everything. You manage the threats and you
Fix
put,
your interest rates.
your portfolio's dropping.
Yeah, speaking of black swans, I think fucking it's coming.
Do you want to double down on what you just said, because it made no sense?
yeah,
What the fuck are you talking about, man?
I thought, and you know what the worst part is? I thought you guys got it,
I didn't get it.
and I'm like, I'm like,
I
am I
look
missing
around.
something?
I got Tony Hawk over here with his hat fucking 45 degrees off to the left. Interest rates.
There's a fix your interest rates.
Charlie's just in the peak of a big identity crisis because everyone's fucking pissed off about him quitting power.
I'm not. I don't attach my identity.
I'm just geeing you up. I know you're not quitting.
Nah, you're pissed off.
And he hasn't quit powerlifting. We do actually need it. He hasn't quit powerlifting, but
We haven't. No, because me and Donnie said we're going to start putting all fitness ideas into like economic ideas and just start saying random shit. But I meant more fix your interest rates is like interest rates going up, fix it. So manage the threat.
All right.
I've
Missed
got
a couple words.
I'm going to completely switch the topic here, but can you run us through your decision as to why you have still yet to do any seminars in Australia? Why did you go overseas straight off the bat?
It's a huge flex.
Yeah, it's a massive flex.
It's a flex.
I haven't seen it being done before.
Because
Pave your own way.
I'd never been to Europe, and just because everyone was like, Angus, why haven't you travelled? Everyone loves travelling. It's like I just never had the fucking money to do it because I was a broke musician, and I was a broke uni student, and I was a broke PT. But towards the end of my
Have you
little
tried
attempt
fixing
at
your
being a
interest
rock
rates?
star, yeah, that was it. Didn't lock in a low
It
enough
was a threat
interest rate.
management issue. That's what it was.
It was getting to the point where we were getting more plays overseas than we were getting in Australia.
Oh,
just through
really?
The power of the internet. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And
What do you reckon's caused that?
a comedian was using our music in some of his videos and stuff like that. I think that helped the spread of it. Also, Triple J fucking hated us. Shout out to Richard Kingsmill, fucking ancient cunt who's just
Why did Triple J
he's meant to be a
hate?
youth broadcaster, and then he's the head of programming at Triple J. I think he finally fucking gave it up. But again, just like this 70-year-old was like, "No, young people don't like this." I'm like, fucking. We're getting heaps of downloads on Spotify, dickhead. Hey, sorry, that was too aggressive. But
Fuck him.
and again, like, that was just such a bottleneck for us just trying to get airplay in Australia back then. But we were getting so much more independent radio play over in Europe, especially the UK. So I thought we were on the verge of maybe putting together an international tour. But then obviously the wheels fell off the band really, really quickly. There were some management issues. There was also some interpersonal issues within the band. Like with any sort of 5-man show, it's a miracle that we kept it together for as long as we did. But then I pivoted it into fitness, and all my ex-bandmates, they were still sort of in music. But sort of in the back of my mind, I think there was always this thing of like, oh, who'd be the first one of the lads to put together an international tour? And a few of the boys got into some like pretty fucking pumping bands, but your boy still got the first international tour.
You were going through that whole story halfway through, and I'm like, what? Triple J, I thought for some reason I was like, your podcast when you go airplay.
I thought the podcast
Yeah,
was
that's what
the
I thought.
European.
I'm like,
No, that's my
band,
thing with the podcast.
I'm like,
as well.
why is your
I'm still
podcast
trying
on
to
Triple
chase
J?
the downloads. But
Why is this old guy ever going to play high performance podcast on Triple J? It's a
that's
music
what I was
show.
thinking. Then I realized when you start talking about the band, I'm like,
Nah,
oh.
come on. Don't you know Angus is on Spotify? He's got. Can you?
Music.
No, so this was the thing.
I've listened to some of it.
What instruments do you play?
I played bass because, like,
Bass.
when I was in year 7, all my mates were starting a band, and obviously everyone plays guitar. There's always a kid that plays drums, and they needed a bass player, so
Last
it was
man
bass
picked.
for Christmas. But in our last year of the band, and this is why I'm such a big believer in just persisting with things for over 5 years. No one gave a fuck about us for 5 years. Then we started to get a little bit of momentum, and things are just exponential, especially when things are on the internet. And my first year in PT, by the end of that, the band had 100,000 plays on Spotify.
Let's go.
And then a year after we broke up, one of our songs had over 1 million plays on Spotify. But yeah, I sort of looked at it, I was like, oh, all right, that's why you just need to persist with these things. And I'm not passionate about music, and I was a shit musician. I was just lucky enough to be around the right people, but it did sort of teach me that lesson of like, oh, you can really be on the verge of something, and you just got to keep persisting. And then there is that sort of exponential growth once you crack it.
Yeah.
But the reason why I did the UK tour is because, I don't know, I just sit there shit posting on Instagram, and to go from that to then to the point of like, and even when we're in the band, you're like, how many downloads do you need to be getting overseas before you can actually do like an international tour or something like that? But then Chris Speed reached out to me. He was one of the first weightlifters that had any patience for any of my ideas on strength training or anything like that. And I think we've been sort of chatting back and forth for over a year, and he's like, man, you should come out. Like, I do weightlifting seminars and stuff like that. I think we could put something together. So just to have someone who had one experience organizing seminars, and then also just to throw out the invitation like that, like, I'm so grateful. Like, he's just done so much for me in that regard, like helped me get an experience like that. And then obviously people then saw me go over to the UK, do that, and that was a real mad experience. But then obviously everyone's like, why aren't you doing the Aussie tour? But like I said, like, he was just the first person to ask.
It was the first opportunity.
Yeah. So the Aussie tour, I've got Adelaide I'm doing on the 10th of December, and then I'll be in Perth on the 17th of December. And then back
And are they weightlifting?
back to the UK? No, so the full general physical preparation seminars. So just the full training system, my view of human movement, my worldview, my view of human movement, my view of programming. We're just going to cover absolutely everything in one day. It's just going to be fucking bonkers. It's nothing like it that's ever been done in Australia before. But then bouncing back to the UK, because again, it was just weightlifting seminars in the UK. So heading back, teeing up with Chris and Kean, and also Matt Watson, the plyo guy, hopping on board, and we're going to do a massive GPP seminar in London. It's going to be February 4th, and I said there's never been anything like these GPP seminars in Australia, but what we have planned for London, when we pull that off and when people see what we're doing with that, then we're just going to take that all over the world, and hopefully I'll be able to bring that out to Australia, but then heading to the States after London just to do a bit of work there, a couple of seminars, hopefully Ohio, New York, and then somewhere in Florida, and then I'll be back home for March, and then that's when we'll do the East Coast tour.
Yeah, mad. 6 months. 6 months of fun.
Can't wrap my head around it sometimes.
Did you ever think it would get to this from you just posting memes and shit posting and pot shotting Kaz?
No, man, and like I've had so much imposter syndrome over the last year. Like I spent basically my whole first mentorship bag on going to therapy and trying to get my head straight. And yeah, it was a really helpful experience. And like I've sort of learned how to embrace it. And like I'm grateful for the imposter syndrome because it tells me that like there is. I don't think anyone would look at me and be like, that guy's really self-aware. But I'm like, I feel like I have some degree of self-awareness now. Like now I sort of embrace aspects of that imposter syndrome. And I think I've chatted to a few people lately about it, and they're like, because I'm like, I can't figure out like why people get around me so much. Because like, I'm just a journalist who shit posts on Instagram at the end of the day. But they're like, oh, it just comes across as like just really honest. And I think that that's something that's important to lean into, just like with how you put stuff out there. And
yeah, I think one of your biggest assets is you have an ability to, and it is probably your writing background, but the way in which you can articulate and within 2 or 3 sentences, a whole thought process that I've had, but I've never been able to just be like, that is exactly what
succinct.
Yeah. I don't think there's no one else that does it.
In universe, like word counts always used to get to me because I was like, man, if I can say it in less words, like why aren't you rewarding me for being concise? Like I would always have to like stretch out my paragraphs when I was writing these bullshit uni essays and stuff like 5,000 words. Fuck.
I'll give you 3
If you really need
names.
5,000 words to explain it, like, do you know what you're talking about? Like, I understand where they're coming from. They want you to flesh out your ideas and things like that. But yeah, I think I've just always been able to be concise. It's probably one of the few natural talents that I have, and I've been able to lean into it a little bit, especially it really suits Instagram more than university.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe Twitter even more.
Yeah, it's funny because I effectively use Instagram like Twitter. And even it's funny, some of my stuff ends up on Twitter and gets cross posts and stuff and seems to do well. But again, you can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, you can. I'm building it out. Eventually you won't be able to escape me. I'm just going to be on every platform. So enjoy it now while there's a bit of space without Angus on it, because honestly it won't be left for long.
You're coming in.
Yeah, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, it's all coming. Brace yourselves.
So obviously you're expanding into like seminars and workshops and your online mentorship's pumping. But what other things do you have in the pipeline or in the scope that you want to expand into or grow to?
I think the biggest thing that I want to push into now is just like keep just developing the seminars, because that's still something where I'm developing my craft. And like I said, I'm grateful to anyone who shows up to my first seminar series and again helps me with this process. But I think product development is something that I'm really passionate about nowadays, because again, I used to just see that as a way for money hungry cunts to scale their businesses. But then at the end of the day, I think it is just this thing where Pat Davison talks about this, like no one is consciously aware of their training system. Whereas like when you make a training product that someone can download and already start using while you're asleep, you know what I mean? It's like you have to really have this acute awareness of your training system. And when you develop a training product, it's there on paper staring you back in the face. And it can be one of the scariest things. And a lot of people never have the balls to do it. And one, because again, I think a lot of people just don't want to be consciously aware of their systems. Or again, people just see product development as the scummy, like 10x your business sort of side of things. But I'm like, no, there's this really wholesome aspect of it that's like self-reflective and you become aware of your processes. Because again, like, I never used to be able to elevator pitch myself as a coach or anything like that, and I still don't know if I can necessarily. I was just like, no, I'm just smarter than the other coaches. I just do things a little bit better. But then when you have that product, you're like, oh, that's what I do.
Yeah. So
I didn't answer your question. Yeah, develop a few more products and things like that.
I think just
get the GPP program pumping. And I think the challenge there is there's a good community there and things like that, but I really want to push the community aspect of that. So if any of the GPP boys are listening, like I get a message to me, they're like, oh, I don't want to be too active in the chat and annoying everyone. I'm like, no, I want to get the community vibes pumping. Like, let's have a yak in there. And it's good we're sort of talking about UFC on the weekend and stuff. And yeah, so like I said, finding out how to drive community within some of these products that I've created, and that's when they become living, breathing things that drive themselves, and that's peak business, baby.
Yeah. Diversify.
Something I don't even know if I'm able to construct this sentence, but thinking. No, but like in chats with you, I feel like you're very like cognizant of developing your processes. It doesn't even look like coaching. You know what I mean? It looks like this creative side. You're talking about journaling and creating space for creativity, and
it's a lot of cute shit.
And sitting all the cute shit, and then sitting with your thoughts and creating space for thoughts to just sit there and fucking think and construct your worldview. Has that? How would you put? Oh, it's probably your mentorship. Sign up for your mentorship.
Week 7.
Week 7. There you go.
Week 1 is sort of where we lay down the worldview. Week 7 is where we really look at product development and structuring your business and understanding the creative process.
Sweet,
because everyone's creative.
We'll
just don't know it.
We'll get a sneak peek here, and we'll funnel them into your mentorship. So let's construct this person who's lost in the weeds, this evidence-based individual. What would you do to push them to start molding themselves into this person that's constructing their worldview to develop their system and go from there?
Everyone already has it in them, and it's who you were before you stepped into the fitness industry and you got told that you know nothing, right? Because like you had a worldview before you stepped into the fitness industry, and there were probably some principles that you had to let go of because you thought that every bit of knowledge that was applicable to the fitness industry had to come specifically from within the field. Yes. So it's about stepping back and having some respect for who you were before you stepped into this machine, and then just trying to engage with those principles. And like they're all the things that make you different as a coach, because again, like if you think about why people reach out to you for coaching, everyone can do the sets and reps, but then like maybe someone just wants to talk about kickboxing in between sets or just some chalk shit, and then like that's ultimately how you stand out, differentiate yourself, and then also like I guess in a more sciencey way, like engage with these biopsychosocial concepts. Like you become someone that like an aspirational figure to a particular type of person, and I guess as well, then that feeds into all your content and stuff like that. Because again, if you're just talking about fitness, you're going to run out of ideas pretty quickly. Whereas like if you're willing to sort of embrace other aspects of your life and share that with people, I think then you just realize there's just this endless well of stuff to dip back into. Even just with like your own creative ideas and stuff like that, like people are just so obsessed with just filling their books and stuff like that. But like there just comes a point where you just have to deliberately create this space to just so you're bored, sitting there scratching your nuts, and that's when all the ideas come in. It's like if you're just busy or always stressed out, it's like don't expect to have any cute creative ideas or be thinking differently, because again, you think about like why are kids so creative? It's because they're just bored out of their fucking minds, but they're also not stressed. So you have to find ways to, again, this is some real cute therapy shit. Like people say inner child, I don't really like that, but again, like everyone has that still in them. It's just that maybe you went to school, got bullied, developed negative inner monologue. It's like, nah, it's a shit idea. It's a shit idea. Because again, so many coaches tell me that they don't have any ideas. I'm like, you've never shared any of your ideas. Like everyone has ideas. Everyone is creative at the end of the day. It's just about, like I said, peeling some of that shit back and then having the balls to share it. It is a bit of a leap of faith initially, but then you get some good feedback. You realize that you're the biggest cunt in your life and that everyone around you is actually really, really supportive and there to clap and help you. And that's been my personal experience anyway. Like I was my biggest critic and I still am. And like I said, I'm grateful for that because you got bigger critics. But again, like if you're not sharing your ideas, like put it out there. There's a great poem somewhere, like keep the channel open. I can't remember who wrote it, but you can look up it. But basically the premise of it is it's like, it's egotistical to be the person who judges your own ideas to the point where you don't share them. It's like, it's actually very humble to put your ideas out there into the world and be like, what do you guys think? And then the feedback's usually a lot kinder than the shit that you'll say to yourself.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, your internal dialogue. I think this was actually from a Jordan Peterson book, the first one.
Chest up, shoulders
back. We're going to bring him in. Jordan, bring him in. Chest up, shoulders back. No, that was Rob Wilkes' book. No, it was that. Are you a slave? Are you a slave with your own self, the tyrant? That's literally
Yeah, fair play. He does say some
no, he
good
does
stuff.
say
I'm
some
too
really, but
critical of
that
him.
was a quote that that resonated with me. It's like, are you the slave with your own self, the tyrant? So like you're literally just beating yourself down, top down internally to the point where you don't actually want to take steps forward and try to be better and in this case create content or put your ideas out there. Like, is the only thing holding you back your own.
It's annoying because it's
self.
such a fucking cliche. But
Yeah.
again, I've just learnt as I get older in life. Turned 30 a couple of weeks ago. It's like all the cliches are cliches
There's
for a
something.
reason.
There's something to them. There's something to them for sure. And there's something, and I got a lot out of just talking to you yesterday, and I think a lot of, like, I'm asking these questions like naively. I know the answers based off of our chat yesterday, but I feel like there's a lot of coaches in very similar situations with this tentativeness to want to put out content for XYZ reasons that you've put out. And I feel like a lot of people would look at you and be like, this cunt's just got a lot of opinions. You know what I mean? But the way you were talking about,
There's a process.
There's a process, and there's this work and this development. It's like, yeah, right. You say you cut the cute shits out the way. You've worked on yourself and whatever else. It's like, man, you are fucking working. Like, you're putting these things out, and there's ideas, and I don't know. Did you always look at creativity as something to be developed as a muscle, or was it just like?
It took me a while to wrap my head around it because, again, even when I was in music, I was aware of these people like Red One and stuff who would just write, like, they'll like come up with like 5 songs in a day. And I was like, what do you mean? And it's funny because, again, everything's principles. They'd be like, well, I show up to my studio at the same time every single day and it's the same environment. And that's just that environment that just triggers that. And it's like this muscle that grows. And I didn't believe in it until I had experienced it myself. But it's funny because, like, I'd experienced it in a gym sense. Like, you know, you show up, you contract your bicep like periodically with some degree of consistency, and the muscle hypertrophies, and everyone has this creative muscle in them, and like you just got to start engaging with it on a regular basis, apply that stimulus. And now because I've experienced it, I believe in it. Like, I know I can just come up with content like just endlessly. Like, there's so much to talk about. But again, it has been this process of just like hypertrophying the creative muscle. And it, like I said, everyone in the fitness industry understands it in this muscular sense, like the way physically the body adapts, but it's the same with the mental side of things and that creative thing. You just got to understand your own creative process the same way it takes time to understand how your body responds to training. And again, there are some broader sort of concepts that apply to everyone. And I think it is like managing stress and creating the space for it. But then as well, like, you're all going to have unique things that help you be at your creative best. Maybe it's engaging with some of your hobbies. For me, journaling really, really helps. Not even for the ideas, but for clearing the head noise. So then the ideas can sort of come through. And yeah.
Hectic.
Apply the principles, man.
Yeah.
Apply the principles.
I think there's definitely something to be said with finding time away from thinking and all of that sort of stuff. Like, I know there's the Einstein thing of
The marbles in the hand.
marbles in the hand. When the marbles drop on, he had like a tin thing that, and he'd wake up and write an idea down, and a lot of his ideas came from that. But also, like, when you're away, like I just had the feelings when I was on a holiday. I was like, yeah. And I was just like, holy shit, like, there's so many areas that I think we could be doing things better, and then coming home and actually starting to action those things, and taking breaks and getting away from the non-stop, just go. Yeah.
In your life. Because again, I look at the way my dad worked. And like, my dad just had a job. He worked so fucking hard to put food on the table for my family 16 hours a day. And I tried to apply that to my business. So my dad would be rolling his eyes if you heard that. No, but actually, no, I did. I got an insecurity about being lazy. I did put in some 16-hour fucking days. I've done my work. But I realized that also wasn't it. That's only going to get you so far. And I think for people who are running their own business or trying to like run a business and simultaneously be a content creator, because that is sort of like what coaching is turning into for a lot of people, it's hard to find these role models to model your work ethic off. And it is important, sorry, to talk about my insecurity about being called a lazy person at like various points in my life, because I was like, no, I've got to prove to people like how many sessions I can do. Like, it's lazy to just be like, no, I only want to do max 25 sessions a week, and then I have to keep all this other space free to like be bored and be creative. But like that is just like this weird component of work. Like it's just different. It's weird. And now I'm glad I understand it because I can point it out to other people and I've seen how effective it can be. Because again, like I said, people are like, I don't have ideas for content. I'm like, it's because you're doing 60 sessions a fucking week. Like you don't have time unless you're just going to film and upload your sessions. But again, that's not going to be creative, inspiring content. It's like you just need to find this cap where your needs are being met and you just have that faith that if you leave that space open, you are fundamentally a creative person and these ideas will just emerge from you. But again, until you've experienced it, I don't expect anyone to trust it.
Yeah, you got to go through the process. Absolutely. Well, we're here at an hour, boys. Do we want to talk about some training related stuff to wrap this thing up, or are we gonna?
See, Jamie, really, we've been talking about training the whole time. It's principles.
Yeah.
I think there was one thing that we did want to touch on, and it was this idea of actually one thing I wouldn't also mind. One of the chats I had with you on the Variety Hour was this idea of RPE, and the subjectivity of RPE is ultimately the golden egg of RPE, and it's when people try to get too accurate with it that you lose the.
It's just people being neurotic fragilistas.
Yeah.
It's like, do you really need to know precisely?
Because I don't think I don't think you would have been exposed to this idea, but this idea was just like a holy shit.
I have.
You have?
I think I listened to that one.
Yeah.
I think so.
I thought.
I know it's still a subjective measure. Yeah, like they get fixated on it's got to be fucking that. It's got to be
The
2
beauty
reps.
of it is that it's subjective.
Yeah. Because it matches up with reality, because reality is subjective. And again, no one wants to embrace that because everyone's like, nah, I got the data, but.
But and I think the big thing with that is that it doesn't fucking matter. If it's an RP 8, 9, 7, who gives a fuck?
Yeah. It's like you can still make progress. Again, like
over time.
But you have to acknowledge all the systems that have worked. This is another thing that I talk about in my mentorship where it's like, fuck optimal. It's like, man, like people jerk it to like Russian periodization schemes. But the Bulgarians didn't periodize. They just showed up multiple times a day and maxed out. And there are a lot of socio-cultural underpinnings of like why that was effective for them. And people are like, no, it was just the drugs that the Bulgarian weightlifters did. I'm like, the Russians weren't smacking drugs. They were smacking drugs and periodization. So yeah. I just think that like once you acknowledge all these systems that are working, you're like, oh, how accurate does a training prescription or a training plan need to be effective?
Stimulative enough.
Yeah.
That's it. Stimulative
Minimum
enough. What's fucking
dose?
0.5 RPE either way.
Can't you just eyeball bar speed? Like, fuck me. Like, yeah, I move quick. Smack some more weight on. Ah, it was a grinder. Leave it there for the day. Whereas like people are like, no, I got to know how many meters per second. Like people want powerlifting to be technical so bad because no one wants to admit that you can just show up, have a crack, and then go home, make sure your recovery is in check. And it's just like, yeah, you probably progressed just fine. But people are always trying to overcomplicate. They're like, no, you got to know your bar speed, otherwise you won't make progress. I know no one's explicitly saying that, but again, it's just all this unnecessary stuff. And I'm not saying that like, yeah, VB it's so superfluous.
VB, it's just one thing I could never wrap my head around. I just can't do
I think if you're in a room with like, you got 50 pubescent boys, and you're like, all right, like I need to find a way to just rein these guys in.
All the competition of it, the competition of it to like.
It's just another, as Franco and Pellizzeri would put it, maybe it's just another evidence-based industry. Like people came up with all these bodies of evidence and tortured the data just so they could sell a bunch of Nord boards. And I think people just want VBT to be a thing, so they just got more shit to sell.
Yeah,
I said it.
Nord boards definitely. Nordboard's got absolutely rinsed, and there was the adductor one as well. I reckon
they're an adductor board.
Yeah,
it's
the squeeze one because we used to do that with Carlton. You had to like put a pressure cuff in between, and depending on what you'd be, would somehow dictate your recovery from the.
There's another one called it's called Kangatek. Yeah, and you can move these bars. It's essentially just dynamometers on bars that you can just move in different directions, so you can test everything.
What?
No, I know what he's talking about. And it is just it's just moving fucking bars, structural balance.
Oh, you can push any direction.
Yeah, it's like, all right, hip AD adduction is showing that this newtons and the right side imbalance. Ah, you fuck.
But again, it's like if you actually look at science and you actually look at physics, everything about science and where it's going tells you to embrace the chaos. But people can't handle it, so they're just always finding something to cling
They
to.
need order.
All these little life runs that, please, it can't be chaotic. And
Dallas.
again, I just see another VBT thing as people just running away from reality.
Yeah.
It's like they think they're running towards objectivity, but they're actually running in the opposite direction because you're like, oh, my bar speed was this. That means I can predict all these things
That
based
was
off that. And again,
HRV when we first dabbled in HRV. I was like, this thing's broken.
dude,
Telling me I'm never
there's
ready to
gonna be
train.
a day where you have a robot overlord. I don't want to fucking have my watch tell me when I can and can't train. Or like, imagine you get up, you're feeling good, and then your watch is like, you're actually feeling shit. Go back to bed. And you're like, what?
It was, and I was like,
you should take a day off.
We were trying, yeah.
And I'm still coming and hit a PR or some shit. And I'm like, well, that thing told me I wasn't ready to train.
When I was in my band phase, I was just known for just coming off the tail end of these mad benders and always PBing. It's just, I'm not saying I can do it as a 30-year-old, but sometimes shit doesn't make sense.
I feel like a lot of, especially like when we first started lifting, you'd go out on a Saturday night. The best session was the Sunday or the Monday. Like you'd just be, absolutely.
Just put you in that dog mindset. You're like, it's fucking, I don't care if I die
dog,
today. All my
but I feel like-
serotonin's gone.
I feel like then it's like this ignorance is bliss thing. It's the second you get deeper in it and it's like, this variable could potentially affect it. It was like just
analysis paralysis.
Yeah,
You just get
100%.
fucking,
You just got to get dumb as fuck in the gym, honestly, and like disrespect everything that you know a lot of the time.
Well, it's one of Paddy D's principles.
Train stupid.
Yeah,
Just
dumb
train stupid.
exercises.
Nathan Dameron from Travis Mash weightlifting camp. Like, that was the first time I ever heard the concept. Like, again, people were obsessed with like periodization and stuff, and the whole Mash crew, like they were just obsessed with Max Out Friday. And again, everyone's just getting G'd up about that. And they have the Train Stupid ebook, and it just was all about that. Like, sometimes you just got to do some dumb shit.
You got to push
because
it.
it's a
Just gotta
vibe.
do some dumb
It's
shit.
cognitively engaging. And
Yeah, absolutely.
It's I'm finding out more and more with the Alex Viada stuff, the hybrid stuff, because he came when he started doing. There's no real
There's no rule book
or research with that shit, and they've sort of just made it up as they go through their own personal experience. But they're objective enough to look at shit and be like, oh, this generally works better, this doesn't. But I like it because it's kind of, even with now, I'm like, well, you know what? I don't have to do exactly what they're doing. I can figure out my own fucking methods. With my own training and then incorporating endurance stuff.
It's like you don't have to reject the rules. Like I said, it's just about like watering them down just enough, or just shading in the borders. Like same way, it's like you don't have to do like all these phasic structuring and stuff like hypertrophy block into a strength block. It's just like, generally have that sort of linear development and change in the stimulus going, but just like shade all the blocks into each other, and then it is just, again, much more reflective of reality.
Phase potentiation.
Athanasiu methods.
Phase potentiate these nuts.
These nuts.
I think we'll leave it there. If anyone wants to jump in on your seminars again, where can they find the tickets or the information?
Link in bio for the Adelaide seminar. It's on the 10th of December. Smack bang in the middle of Adelaide. Will be in Perth on the 17th of December. Keep an eye out for the announcement of the UK GPP seminar. It's going to be hectic. It'll be on February 4th.
Hectic. What was your band's name?
He doesn't want to say. He never
It's
says
just
it publicly.
gnarly, man, because like we're
All right,
all
don't worry
coming out
about
of high school.
It's all
and,
good.
like,
Don't stress.
check it out if you want, because I'm proud of the amount of downloads it got. So it's the Maze on Spotify, and it was a good band. I need to not be so fucking insecure about it. I wasn't even right.
I was expecting something with the Maze. I was expecting something really shit based off of that intro.
No, it's like I said.
You're good.
Yeah, it's just like I said. Our singer was fresh out of high school. Some of the lyrics make me cringe, but it is what it is.
It's all right. You got millions. It's all that matters.
God, them millies.
Zach was the one who fucked us in court anyway, so I can say that now.
See you later. Thank you very much. Done.